I'm Chuck Flink, and I'm president of Greenways Incorporated, and I've been asked to talk about National Trail System, past, present, and future. So what I'd like to do in starting the story is talk about the contributions of Warren Manning, who in 1923 created a national plan for the United States. And as part of this national plan, Mr. Manning wrote a subsection of the plan addressing essentially the creation of a national greenway system. And these greenways were designed to connect all across the United States from coast to coast and to connect areas of national significance, including national parks. Now, Warren Manning wasn't just some dude off the street. He was employed by Frederick Law Olmsted Jr., who was a very important figure in American history. Olmsted Jr. wrote the Organic Act of 1916. He was a ghostwriter for a California congressman who was a sponsor of the bill. And the Organic Act created the national park system. And so Manning was an employee of Olmsted Jr., and he saw the need to connect all these systems together. And of course, Olmsted Jr. is important for beyond just his contributions to the Organic Act. He's the son of Frederick Law Olmsted, who is so well known in American history as the designer of Central Park, the father of landscape architecture. One of Olmsted's really great contributions was the development of Buffalo's park and greenway system. The city of Buffalo brought him up to the city after he had finished Central Park and asked that he do the same for Buffalo. Olmsted evaluated the city and came back to the leaders and said, "You don't have enough land to create something the equivalent of Central Park. But what I can do is create a series of parks and link them together with parkways." And really that was the creation at that time of a park and greenway, park and trail system, which has survived to this day. So it was a great contribution to the American landscape. At the same time that Warren Manning was thinking about an interconnected system of greenways across America, Benton Mackaye was dreaming of a long-distance hiking trail through the Appalachian Mountains. Mackaye's original vision included the development of not only a hiking trail, but these communal lodges along the way that would host people as they traveled this beautiful mountainous corridor. And essentially, the Appalachian Trail was established in 1921 and finished in 1937. So we have these two concepts really merging together: long-distance trails for the benefit of people that wanted to take a long-distance stroll across the American landscape, and an integrated national system of greenways. Now, what happened is, over a period of say 40 years, a great interruption to these concepts. We had the stock market crash in 1929. We had followed by the Great Depression, and then we had World War II, and we had the Cold War. So a great interruption of forces that really delayed, in my opinion, the implementation of these systems. But in 1968, a group of authors came together and created the National Trail System Act, which was passed by President Lyndon Johnson in 1968. And what's interesting about that is when you look at the National Trail System and its intent and what the specific language was of that act, it addresses outdoor recreation needs, but it also addresses specifically primarily near urban areas of the nation and addressing scenic areas and along historic travel routes. What the implementation of the National Trail System Act looks like today is primarily focused on national recreation corridors and national scenic or cultural routes. Sort of the implementation of the National Trail System Act hasn't really impacted to a great degree the needs of urban areas. And you can see that by looking at a map today of where those National Trail System routes are found. And by the way, this is the 50th anniversary of the National Trail System Act here in 2018. In 1985, another shot in the arm for a National Trails and Greenway system occurred when Lawrence Rockefeller approached President Ronald Reagan and asked that he create a commission on Americans outdoors. Now that commission conducted meetings, 50 public meetings across America, and they basically returned with an idea of a national greenway system. A system that would connect Americans to outdoor resources really close to where they lived and worked. Interestingly, in that language, they also talked about the expansion of the federal estate. something that really caught both Reagan and Vice President George Bush off guard. The response to that was very different from what the commission sort of discussed. The Vice President's office was charged with issuing a rebuttal to the President's Commission report, and they published something called A Nation of Communities, which really focused more on Americans' outdoors and their love of hunting and fishing rather than trails. But nevertheless, the seeds were sown, and we had an adjustment to the vision of a national greenways and trail system. I think one of the most significant legislations that ever occurred in the history of trails and greenways was the passage of the Intermodal Surface Transportation Efficiency Act in 1991, otherwise known as ICE-T. This was the first major overhaul of the Surface Transportation Act, which was originally established in 1956, and really gave bicycling and walking an incredible leg up on funding. Prior to the passage of ICE-T in 1991, about $50 million had been spent on bicycle and pedestrian systems across America. And since the passage of ICE-T, billions have been spent in support of it. It's been the greatest financial shot in the arm to the growth of American trails and greenways. And I also want to call out and give special mention and credit to the Rails to Trails Conservancy and the work of David Burwell and Peter Harnick, because the Rails to Trails Conservancy really changed the way in which people thought about long-distance trails and trails that responded to urban needs. Interestingly, as David Burwell tells the story, he was working for the National Wildlife Federation, and he was getting calls from hunters who were trying to figure out how to get their carcasses out of hunting areas. And they wanted to know how they could use these abandoned rail corridors to do that. And so really that was the birth of the Rails to Trails movement, which has really grown significantly over the last 32 years.